Right, Paul. So we've just talked about how all the little muscles work in the hand now. So I was just alluding to these marvelous little intrinsic muscles inside your hand, which have this strange role of basically flexing the MCP joint and extending the IP joints here to do bar chords, either with this finger or any of the others. They also have this job. I mean, they'll do that with the fingers in any position, but they will also have this job of moving your finger side to side like this. So if you use the intrinsic on this side, it will pull it this way. If you use the intrinsic on the other side, it'll pull it the other way. And if you use them both at once, it just does that. So again, it's rather sort of complicated. But if you work, imagine how hard these work in guitarists, and they're doing all these complicated movements. And like any sportsman doing that kind of exercise, they'll get short, they'll get fatigued, they'll get swollen towards the end of the working day, and then they'll shorten unless you do some stretches, which is why it's really important to learn. And I've got a blog on my website called Finger Yoga, which is all about stretching the intrinsics, which often get tight. And if people try to bend that joint here and this joint here and extend this one, doing this movement, making this sort of swan neck shape like this, they'll find that they can do it easily on their little finger, easily on the index finger, but the middle and the ring, particularly in guitarists and pianists, often very tight, and they can't easily get this skin here to touch the skin at the back like that and extend these joints at the same time. It's often very tight like that. Can you do that, Paul? Can you do this position with your hands? And then at the same time, bending these MCP joints backwards like that as far as you can. Oh, you can. So you're very supple. So that's good. So many people can't do that very easily when they've been working their hand really hard. So, and if of course your intrinsic muscles are really tight, then when you come to do that, your other muscles, because this is an intrinsic negative position, this is an intrinsic minus position, so they're not working, they're just having to relax. Then your extensor and your flexor tendons are going to have to work quite hard if these can't relax, if they're tight. So then having tight intrinsic will mean that your flexors are having to work harder and your extensors are having to work harder. So you might get some swelling in those tendons, and that may contribute to trigger finger or carpal tunnel syndrome or chronic strain in your forearm, and all the things that you talk about with our patients, which is that you really want to be playing without any tension, excessive work here. So having tight intrinsics is a problem. And we've seen patients like that, haven't we, Paul?
We've seen a lot of them. And as you were just talking about, the idea of partial relaxation, so that not all muscle groups are used at the same time if they don't need to be. But you can only do that if you have awareness of how to use your hand and that you are constantly checking yourself on that. Because it's so easy just to grab the guitar, start playing, and not knowing, as you were just talking about, the different joints and the different parts of extrinsic and intrinsic muscles and how that relates to the rest of the motor complex.
The whole kinetic chain all the way up the arm. And of course, if you're working these muscles really hard down here, then your wrist stabilizers have to work as well. Otherwise, your wrist will flex or extend. So your wrist stabilizers are working. And if they're working because they cross your elbow, you're going to have to be resisting that and providing your antagonistic muscles to provide some sort of elbow stability. And if they're working hard because your biceps crosses over your shoulder and your triceps crosses over your shoulder, you're going to have to tense these up as well. So the whole thing is what the physios call a kinetic chain, of course, and it kicks off a whole chain of tension.
Yeah, and what it stops when it doesn't work perfectly, it stops the flow in the music.
Yeah, and without tension, you sound better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So does that cover pretty much everything about the intrinsics and how they work and how they and why it's important to keep them supple?
I think so. Should we do the next thing about the bending?
Yes, we'll go on to that next. I'll just stop this recording now.